Hey everyone, this week we'll be doing something a little bit different, not going towards shiny apps right now, but with the minor league season starting up relatively soon here, I'm going to show you a video on how to get some board data from Fangraphs, which I highly recommend you support them as well. Get a membership. As you can see, I have a membership up in the top right there. Highly recommend you getting a lot of great quality content in here. So what essentially I'm going to do is I tried scraping this data without having to hit export data for these things. But essentially what we're going to do today is get all of these data tables from scouting position, scouting pitching, physical attributes, and summary, and combine them all into either one data table or, say, a hitting data table and a pitching data table in R. So the reason why I'm starting on here is I'll export the data for each of them. So you'll just click this, go to the next one. It might have you ask, hey, type in a certain thing, and I'll get to that in a second, but just export all of them and then have them on your machine, and we'll go to the next step. Now that we're back in R, let us obviously get started by loading in some libraries. So Tidyverse is the first thing, and then the second thing I'll have you install, or a new package that it'll install, which is useful for playing videos from, say, YouTube, is the TubePlayR package. And what that essentially does is, if you saw on my Twitter page kind of a preview of what my next video will be, you saw O'Neal Cruz's video inside the RStudio console. So this allows you to play YouTube videos within the R console. So I'll run DevTools, install GitHub. For me, it'll say it hasn't changed since last time, but I'll run it just to help you and understand what's going on here. So in my case, I'll hit force equals true. Don't have to worry about it in your case unless you already have it installed. Make sure all these packages are installed, so feel free to update them. I'm just going to hit 3 to update none of them, and then allow R to install that TubePlayR package. So we just wait for it to load, and boom, it's good to go. So now we can say library TubePlayR. So we'll run this. Now it's in our console. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you our working directory. And basically the get working directory function allows us to see where our working directory is, where we can pull files and whatnot. In this case, the CSV files that we pulled. So in this case, I moved those files to a specific folder, so that way when we pull all of those files, we can read them in. So the way to do that, in order to pull those files from a specific folder, is you can change a different path or just change your working directory. And in this case, I'll change my working directory since it's a little bit easier to explain. So I'll change my working directory to literally what it is and then add in that folder name. So I'll say C users, my name, Robert Fry, documents, and then the folder I call is the board data. So I'll set that as my working directory. Now that's my working directory. Now I'm going to set basically an argument called files. And basically what this will do is allow us to list off the files that are in that folder. So the function will be list files. The path will be, again, our working directory. So you can just say get WD. And then our pattern, in this case, is .csv, which are the CSV files that we pulled earlier from Fangraphs, those 4 different files. And then we're going to do a list apply, since it's under a list, so an L apply. And that argument for X is going to be files, because we're looking for those files, and then we're going to use from the readr package, which is under Tidyverse, read CSV. And so I will rerun all of this. And so in here, you can see, after I type files, you can see that I have 4 different files listed inside that folder, so I highly recommend you put it in a folder and then change your working directory as such. So I have attribute data, CSV, which is like players' attributes, like their body frame, their delivery, etc. Hitting data, so the hitting data for those minor league prospects, pitching data, and then I just call it OG data, which is just the first table you see when you look at the board. So now that we have those listed in there, we're going to acquire kind of those data tables. So you can kind of see that the first element of this vector is attribute data. So that'll be files 1. Hitting data, files 2. OG data, files 3. Pitching data, files 4. And I'll show you here in a second. So it's under temp in this case. So we can see that it's our list. So I'm going to say pitch data, and I'm going to say temp, and then 4, because that is the fourth element of our list of files. And I'm going to say select, negative position, negative org, negative, and then kind of those tick marks on the top left of your keyboard if you have a Windows computer. I can't tell you off the top of my head where it's at on a Mac computer. And we'll say negative age, negative future value, and then again those tick marks, negative ordering. And essentially what we're doing here is we're removing columns that don't match from the original data set in the OG data CSV file. So we're going to do that. Now we're going to say rename, and we'll say pitcher underscore name equals name. And again, that's just to have a different name, and while we look into our data set, we have that kind of stuff. So I'm going to run this line, and now you can see our pitch data is in there. So you can see that you'll have all of the pitcher names in there, if they have a Tommy John date, what their fastball type is, their fastball current and future value, their slider current and future value, curveball current and future value, changeup current and future value, command current and future value. Something that's really cool that I recently stumbled across is they have spin rate for fastballs on average, their spin rate for breaking balls, where they sit, and then where they top out at, as well as their player ID. So keep the player ID. It'll be useful for us later on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to separate those future and current fastball grades into separate columns, so that way you can analyze any differences there, or feel free to have that data. So we're going to say pitch data, piping operator, and then we're going to say separate from the tidyr pack, which is under tidyverse. And we're going to say the column equals fastball. And the into arguments, we're going to say into current underscore FB, and then future underscore FB. And then outside of that, we're going to say our sep, which is our separator, and in quotes, we're going to do 2 forward slashes and a backslash. And the reason why is that those backslashes is it serves as an escape to indicate hey, I want to separate by that backslash. As you can see back in the pitch data, we can see that backslash. So we're going to do that, and then I'm just going to continue to add these piping operators and just go further down the line and change the code slightly. And you'll see what I mean here in a second. So let me make sure I have enough, and then change this now into slider and slider. Just go further down the line. You can say curveball into current, curveball, future, curveball. Change this to changeup. And then change this last one to command. So we have those separated out, if that makes sense. And then lastly, that sits range, we're going to separate that as well. So we're going to say sits, and we'll say our min fastball range. And then instead of saying max fastball range, it sounds confusing since there is another column that says, what's his max fastball, i.e. tops. I'll just say max fastball range where it'll say, okay, well, he typically sits between this number and this number. And then in this case, since it's a dash, we'll use a dash instead of a backslash. So now what we're going to do is squish the columns together, because as you can see, there's going to be spaces in between these, because you can see there's a space in between the slash. So to get rid of that, you can run mutate across and then everything, which means just mutate across every variable in our data set, and we're going to run the function string squish. So string squish under the stringer package. You don't have to have parentheses for this particular case. Now make sure you do have dplyr version 1.0.0 at least downloaded, so double check to make sure that you have that. You can check in here in packages. So when I go down to dplyr, my version is 1.0.5. So because if you don't have that across function will not be available. And then now we're going to add another piping operator. Now we're going to say mutate at bars, which is variables, current fastball, and then colon tops. And we're going to convert those variables to numeric. So that way we can add, subtract, manipulate, etc. And then lastly, we're going to run dplyr filter, and then in an exclamation point is.na player ID. So that way we only have players that have a player ID, which is useful for garnering our functions for joining columns. So we'll run all that, open it up. Now we can see each pitcher and their current fastball, future fastball, current slider, future slider, so on and so forth, and be able to have those ranges. So what we're going to do next now is do the same thing for the hitting data set. What I've done here is just added code from another script that I have, and I'll just break it down for you quickly. I want to be able to have this video in a short amount of time done for you. So I essentially pulled the second temp file. So again, when I run temp, the second table is the hitter table. So we're going to acquire that. All right. And now we're going to, again, remove the columns that don't match with the original data set, change name to batter name, and then again go into change the hit power to, or the hit column into current hit and future hit, game power, raw power, speed, and fielding, and then change some of the column names. So I'll say hard hit percentage, so that way whenever we need to grab those columns, we don't have to get those tick marks. Instead of saying hard hit PCT equals, you allow to get that underscore without having to use those tick marks. And then another thing I will change is, I'll say bat control equals bat control, and same for pitch selection. So pitch SEL equals pitch underscore or pitch SEL with a space. So, and then again, squishing those strings so that way we don't have any unnecessary spaces, and then as well as converting those columns to numeric so that way we can manipulate them, and then lastly removing that player ID. So I'm going to run all of this, and it's in our data set, so we can see that we have batter name, org rank, so I'll actually need to remove org rank as well, and then current hit, future hit, pitch selection, bat control, game power, future game power, raw power, speed, fielding, average EV, hard hit percentage, max EV. So this is actually pretty cool to be able to see average exit velocity, hard hit percentage, and max exit velocity for these minor leaguers. Really interesting to be able to see some kind of analysis there. So the other thing is I will just rerun this code by saying negative org rank. So I'm going to run this again and get the necessary hit data, and then we'll move on to attribute data, which is a simple one-liner. And again, going up to our temp data, we can see that the attribute data is the very first data set. So we're going to say attribute underscore data, and we'll say temp1, piping operator, select negative name, negative position, negative age. We want to remove those columns from our data set. And then we'll get into our total data set, which is, or I should say, not our total data set, but our original data set, which is the third table in this case. So I'll say total data, say temp3, piping operator, and then I will rename these columns since, again, you don't want to use those tick marks, or it's easier not to use those tick marks. So I'll say current level equals current level, add the underscore. Now there's a way you can do this through the janitor package in terms of clean names, if you feel like you want to do that quicker. Or you can do it this way as well, just to make sure that you are changing the columns that you want to change and are aware of it. So I'm just going to say sign org equals sign org with those quotes, and then signed from with that underscore, signed from. So if you want to do any analysis in terms of there. Now, when we look at the, before I add this, let's actually look at it. So when we go in our total data set, you can see every prospect, their current level, position, org, top 100 ranking, organizational ranking. Some of them have 0 for whatever reason. Just you can change that to a 1 if you'd like to. Trend, future value, ETA, risk, age, height, weight, bats throws, sign year, signing market, signing organization, bonus, sign from, report. So you can view some reports that were written from fan graphs, and then video. So the thing is, the video just shows the video ID. So you obviously want to be able to watch these videos, correct? So we're going to add a piping operator, dplyr mutate, and we'll say video equals if else is .na video, comma, na. Otherwise, we'll say https www.youtube.com. Actually, I forgot to do a paste 0 in front of it, so paste 0, youtube.com/watch $v equals, and then put in video. Just make sure that mutate is good to go, and make sure you have video in the correct grammar. And then again, dplyr filter exclamation point is .na player ID. Remove those that don't have a player ID, and you can see what this looks like here. So we'll run total data again. Now we have those YouTube videos. So let's look at, let's say, Wander Franco. So we're gonna, before we get into joining the tables, let's run a simple function from toPlayR. So I will say toPlayR : toPlay. And this time I will say URL equals total data, total data, piping operator, dplyr filter, and we'll say name equals Wander Franco, and then we'll say dplyr pull, since we're pulling that variable video. So we'll run this, and boom, you have Wander video Wander Franco video right here in your R console while you're coding. Pretty fun stuff. So what we're going to do last now is we're going to join the data table together, and I'm going to show you how to have a hitting data set in one table and a pitching data set in one table. And then I'll just show you like real quick how to make just a giant data table of both hitting and pitching data onto one set. What we're going to do is create those hitting and pitching data sets that are merged together. So I'll say hitting data all piping operator, or not piping operator, left join, and we'll say hit data and total data by, or excuse me, actually let's do the other way around. Total data and hit data by equals player ID. And make sure there's a capital I in ID. Go back and do that. I did have an issue doing that prior to this video. So just make sure it is a capital I in player ID. So I'll run that, and we can see that when I go into here, we have hitting data. Now, for guys that maybe don't have hitting data, so like Mackenzie Gore won't have hitting data. I did remember when we changed that batter name, etc. from original name. Well, we can do a dplyr filter, and we'll say is.na batter name. So we have that data. So now I run that. We can see our hitting data got much smaller. Now I'll do another left join with the attribute data. So you could do this all in one line. I just like to space it out so you can visually see kind of what you're doing here in terms of joining tables. So left join hitting data all, and then this time we'll say attribute data by, again, player ID. So run this, and now we have even more columns. Or excuse me, never mind. Maybe I never ran that. Nope, I never ran that. I forgot to run line 37. So now I run that. Now we have all those columns. So again, more data for you to have. So what I'm going to do next is just do the same thing, except now I'm going to say, instead of hitting, I'm going to change it to pitching. And then change a few things like batter name to pitcher name, and then instead of hit data, pitch data. So that way we have all of the pitching data too. So now we have those data sets separated, and now we're good to go. Now if you wanted to do it all together, you could run all data and just do 3 left joins. So left join, total data, hit data by equals player ID, and then just continue to go down the line with all data, left join, all data, pitch data by equals player ID, and then the same for the attribute ID. I'm not going to write that last line, but we're going to remove those. So now that we have that data together, you can save it by writing a CSV or writing it to a database. Another thing you can do to find it interesting for maybe prospect analysis is after maybe each day, every other day, every week or so, when you pull those CSV files from Fangraphs, add a column called date, which is the current date, and simply how you do this. So I'll show you for pitching data. So pitching data all, and we'll say pitching data all, piping operator, mutate, we'll say date equals sysdate. So that way you get the system date, except I don't want data, I want date. So that way, maybe you want to do a time series analysis and see how much does their prospect grades change, how much does their value change whenever you go through stuff in the future. So another thing I will say real quick is like attribute data, you'll see like 2s, 1s, -1s, NAs. So if you look on Fangraphs, it'll be like plus, 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 minus, 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 etc. R changed those from, instead of having pluses, to numeric variables. So if you do want to change it, just leave a comment below in the comments, and I will display the code on how to change that in the comments and be able to have it plus plus if that's your preference. So now we have all of that. Another thing that I did see in here, let me double check, but being able to have all this data together allows you to kind of see some interesting kind of stuff. So that being said, feel free to look into it some more. Don't be afraid to use this to watch some videos. So I'll say, instead of saying total data, I'll say hitting data all. And now I'll say someone who's highly touted, Bobby Witt Jr. Make sure I put a, so I run that. Now I got Bobby Witt Jr. Be able to watch video and have this data. See how it changes over time. It'd be pretty interesting to see how it changes over a week, maybe how it changes over a month, being able to add that last column. So thank you so much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe for future content, and I hope you have a great day.